All right, big day, big sermon today. I say that because there's a lot of misunderstanding about how Jesus is supposed to fit into our life and our culture. The name Jesus, whether you believe in Jesus, whether you're a Christian or not, the name Jesus carries some credibility with it. And so because of that, many times we want to try and kind of like shoehorn Jesus to be on our team, to represent our cause. We kind of try to Photoshop or slap the name of Jesus on top of our tribe because it gives us credibility. I don't really think that's what Jesus had in mind, though. And so I want to unpack some text this morning that I think will explain that. That's all I have by way of introduction. I think the text will speak for itself. We're going to be in Luke chapter 9, starting in verse 51. Luke 9, 51. Let's just jump right in. Luke 9, 51. When the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. Jesus has just spent really his entire life, mainly, up in the northern part of what we would now call the country of Israel. He spent the last 3 years doing ministry mainly around the Sea of Galilee. Towns of 50 to 100 people each, small fishing communities tied mainly to the Sea of Galilee. He's been spending his life serving and living amongst rural country folk. Now at this point, he turns and his feet face Jerusalem, and that's where he's going. He's going to finish what he started. So much of his life, of his ministry, of the entire biblical narrative hinges on this point right here. This verse right here. Jesus set his face to go toward Jerusalem. Specifically, he's walking down there to be crucified. Towards the altar, towards the priests, towards this whole sacrificial system that was set up by God for one purpose: the shedding of blood for the forgiveness of sins. Right, for millennia, Jews have been throwing lamb after lamb after lamb up on the chopping block, shedding blood for the forgiveness of sins. Jesus says, I'm going to be the last lamb to take away the sins of the world. This is the last chopping block. We're going to wrap this up and finish this right here. If this were a movie, this would be the scene in the movie where the hero realizes, or at least makes public, that if he's going to defeat the enemy, he has to ride right into the enemy's base. He has to go right down into the heart of the enemy's lair to pull the enemy out and kill him. Jerusalem is the center, it's the lair, the headquarters for his enemy. And the enemy that Jesus is here to face is this prideful religion. Religion is faith in you. It's faith in what you can do, your behavior to win God's favor and make God love you enough not to send you to hell. It's the opposite of Christianity, which is faith in Jesus. His behavior, what he can do to win God's favor and not send you to hell, for lack of a better way to put it. They're antithetical, religion and Christianity. And this is why we notice every single piece of opposition that Jesus got during his entire ministry, all of it came from religion. All of it. Didn't come from criminals, right, pro-rights, anything, activists, liberals, conservatives, gay people, black people, white people, evolution teachers. No, the center of opposition, every iota of it that Jesus faced came from religion. And Jerusalem is the center of the religious world. Still today, all three major faiths claim Jerusalem as theirs. It's a behemoth of a city. It dwarfs any of the little farm towns that Jesus has been spending time in so far. It's built up on a hill. It's literally carved out of rock. And to get there, this matters, to get there, Jesus had to walk a line straight south through Samaria. But the Samaritans didn't want anything to do with Jesus. And this is going to unfold the point of the sermon. Luke chapter 9, verses 52 and 53. He, meaning Jesus, he sent messengers ahead to a Samaritan village to prepare for his arrival. But the people of the village did not welcome Jesus because he was on his way to Jerusalem. All right, let's unpack this. They didn't want him because the Samaritans had placed their tribe before Jesus. That sinful tribalism, I'm going to submit to you, is what many of us are still doing today. If we're not conscious, all of us revert back into some discriminatory tribalism that has us placing our tribe ahead of Jesus and ahead of our call to love people. The Samaritans really personified that. So the Samaritans are kind of Jews. They're kind of half and half, to the point that we don't really know what to do with them. Kind of like Christian Science. It's not Christian. It's not science. You don't really know what to do with it. The Samaritans were the same way. They pulled away from the Jews and they became their own tribe. Right? They married non-believers, set up their own theology belief system, got their own priest pastoral system, built their own temple, did their own thing. The Jews would not have anything to do with that. So these two people hated each other. It's like Hatfields and McCoys turned up to 10. Jews and Samaritans have been fighting over stuff like this for quite some time, a long time before Jesus comes along. Any respecting Jew, self-respecting Jew, who was wanting to go from Galilee down south to Jerusalem would have taken the long way around Samaria to avoid going through the Samaritan ghetto. They didn't even go there. They hated each other. This is the reason why the story we did not too long ago, the parable of the Good Samaritan, this is why it's such a big deal. It's referred to as the parable of the Good Samaritan because as far as Jews were concerned, right, there weren't any. That was the only one. There were no Good Samaritans. So in another story, when Jesus goes to talk to the Samaritan woman at the well, let alone the fact that she's a woman, she's a Samaritan, and he's actually talking to her, this was a really big deal. So Jesus deciding, right, he's not going to play the tribal game, he's not going to go around, he's going to go straight through Samaria, walk straight through their village and spend some time with them. The Samaritans, because they are playing the tribal game, wanted nothing to do with him. They say, look, if Jesus is going to go to Jerusalem, then that means he's not going to validate our tribe. If he's going to go down there, he's not going to validate us. See, Samaritans were a political group, a racial group, a social group, a religious group, a cultural group, kind of all folded into one. It's where they got their identity from. Being Samaritan defined them. You tracking with me on this? Being Samaritan was their tribe. In the same way that people today have their identity wrapped up in a specific cause, tribe, race, religion, nationality, network, party, political affiliation, whatever, that was this for the Samaritans. And so what they tell Jesus is that they're willing to have Jesus provided Jesus joins their tribe. He needs to validate their theology. He needs to go to their temple. He needs to support their leaders. He needs to have their skin color. He needs to validate them. He can't go to Jerusalem because that means he's going to represent or validate, at least as far as they're concerned, a warring tribe. If he goes there, validates them. At the same time, that means he's offering some correction or rebuke to their way of thinking, their way of living, their way of interpreting things. It's tribalism. They will have Jesus provided Jesus supports their tribe. He won't do that, so they reject him and they stick with their tribe. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what's your tribe? What's your tribe? What's your group? From where do you draw your identity? Is it your family? Is it family before everything else? Some of you, the fact that I would even present that as not being good is a foreign idea to you. Is that your tribe? Is it your nationality? Right? America. America first. Is that your tribe? Skin color? Black pride? White pride? Latino pride? Is that your tribe? Gay pride? Feminist pride? What's your tribe? Maybe it's your social cause, your volunteer work. Like a lot of things we've said before that we end up turning into an idol, which is what tribalism is. It's just idol worship. It doesn't start with a bad thing. Nothing wrong with being happy and prideful about being an American, a white person, a black person, a Latino. Nothing wrong with being happy and prideful about that. But here's how you know. Here's a simple way to know if that becomes discriminating tribalism. All you have to ask yourself is, how does my tribe membership card affect my ability to love Jesus and love people? How does my tribe membership card affect my ability to love Jesus and love people? Because if it's always tribe first, you're a broken clock. You're predictable. It doesn't matter what someone from your tribe does. Like, I know he killed a bunch of puppies with a chainsaw and then robbed some money from my grandma, but, he's part of our tribe. And I can't criticize him, because what would that do about the progress, the forward movement of my tribe? That's the filter. It keeps us from being open-minded. It keeps us from being loving. It's all about the tribe. We do it to people around us when we discriminate against them if they're not a part of our tribe. And whether we realize it or not, we do it to Jesus. That's exactly what the Samaritans did here. Jesus can join, but if he asks me to drop my level of devotion to my tribe, the amount of time, heart, energy, resources that I'm giving to my tribe, then I'm going to reject Jesus. A lot of people work this way. They want people to join their tribe in their life on their terms. Here's the problem. Jesus won't do it. Jesus says, no, I'm God. You don't tell me to follow you. I tell you to follow me. I don't join your team. I don't merge to fit your family, your tribe, your political affiliation, your skin color, your orientation. You follow me and adjust your beliefs accordingly. Because the truth is, we need to be reminded of this. As silly as it sounds, we need to hear this. Jesus is not white or black or American or Baptist or Methodist or Lutheran, whatever. Jesus is God. We join his tribe and adjust our belief systems accordingly. The Samaritans had a different agenda. They gave Jesus the option, join and adapt or leave. So he left. Luke 9:56. So they went on to another village. Jesus left. He didn't tolerate that. The Samaritans missed out on salvation and the blessings of having a relationship with Jesus. Because as much as Jesus wants to save you from your sins and have a relationship with you, he's not going to join your tribe. He's not going to adapt to you. One of the things we're going to see clearly here in a second is that Jesus would make really a bad, an awful American pastor today by most people's standards. He would have a hard time building and maintaining a large following in the American religious system today. I'll make that case here in just a second. Because as Jesus continues on his journey now, he's gonna meet up with a couple of interesting people, have a few interesting dialogues. Each of these people, like the Samaritans, makes a similar error of putting tribe or preference or something in front of Jesus. In other words, they're willing to follow Jesus as long as Jesus doesn't tell them what to believe or how to behave. Let me say that again. Tribalism, at least in a religious aspect, is telling Jesus, I want your name, I want your affiliation, I want the credibility, but I'm not going to allow you to tell me what to believe or how to behave. Let me show you a few examples of some people who kind of tried to do that. Luke 9, verses 57 and 58. As they were walking along, someone said to Jesus, I will follow you wherever you go. But Jesus replied, foxes have dens to live in and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place even to lay his head. What's this guy's problem? Well, Jesus knew his heart, and he challenged him for putting comfort before Jesus. Right, this guy walks up to Jesus and he basically says, Jesus, I want to follow you. Join your church, believe in you, whatever. I want to follow you. And Jesus says, are you sure about that? Because I'm homeless. I'm flat broke. I'm about to be crucified. Do you still want to join? Now this matters because still today, 2,000 years later, and I think a well-intended effort to get someone to try to join the church, accept Jesus, become a Christian, whatever you want to call it, in order to get them to do that, what we normally do, what we often do, is we lie to them. We lie to them. I don't think we do it on purpose, but we lie. We say things like, you're sick? Believe in Jesus. He'll heal you. You're poor? Great. We have this great program, right? God is a big piñata, and believing in Jesus is this stick. And all you have to do is believe in Jesus, and that's like whacking the piñata, and God's going to drop all these trinkets from the sky. He's going to bless you with all this money and bling. You're sad and lonely? Believe in Jesus. Great. He'll give you a really positive self-esteem. All lies. All of them. That's nowhere in the text. We need to be as clear as Jesus was about what people are getting themselves into and what he is calling them to do. Listen, Following Jesus is the best life, but it is nowhere near the easiest life. Absolutely not. Being a Christian, being a deacon, servant in the church, minister, pastor, chap, whatever, that doesn't give me any rights. That doesn't give me any privileges to go to the head of the line and have all my problems fixed and make every day like Friday. Not at all. Being a Christian gives me responsibilities. Now, it's awesome because they're responsibilities that come from God, but it does not entitle me to privileges or riches. Not at all. Jesus tells this guy, you want to follow me? Great. But I don't have a house. I don't know where my next meal is going to come from. So please don't follow Jesus under the myth that he's going to take away all your problems. If you're following Jesus, you're following a broke homeless guy who got betrayed by one of his closest friends and then murdered. So when Jesus got out of the tomb on Easter morning, he had more things on his mind than giving you a brand new car or taking away all your problems. He takes away your biggest one, absolutely. But things down here, we're left to work it out with his help. The promise that he's going to make everything better immediately, that's just ridiculous. That's just, well, it's a lie. Now, that's not much of a sales pitch, I know. But I'm not trying to sell you anything. This is just the truth. This is Jesus as he presents himself. As much as I want you to have Jesus, I want you to have Jesus on his terms, not yours. It's the only way he works. With this guy, we don't know how his story ends. He comes to Jesus and says, Jesus, I want to go into ministry. I want to follow you. And Jesus says, well, it's me before comfort. And then the story fades away. Luke moves on. Luke 9:61 and 62. Another said, yes, Lord, I will follow you, but first let me say goodbye to my family. Jesus told him, anyone who puts a hand to the plow and then looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. Now, what's the issue here? This seems like a reasonable request, right? The problem here is the guy says to Jesus, is right there in the text, he tells Jesus, I will follow you, but. See, that's the problem. It doesn't matter what comes after that. I will follow you, but tells Jesus that something comes before Jesus. And this is where we begin to lose Jesus' attention. I will follow you, but. So I want to stop and ask each of us, how do we tell Jesus, I will follow you, but? We all have a tendency to do it. This is why Jesus would make such a bad American pastor today. Because we all want to follow Jesus when it's comfortable and when it's convenient. I will follow you, I will serve you, I will even give to you when I can. Right? When my life is in order, then I'll go to church. How many of us have said that? When my schedule is ironed out and I can find some free time, then I'll start serving Jesus and serving his church. When things are better financially, then I'll start giving. We used to have a running joke when I was in the Army. Anytime we were told to go somewhere like for PT or exercise, field problem, whatever, we would always say, yes, sir, weather permitting. Right? I'll be there as long as the weather's good. You can guess how far that got us. But we're still telling Jesus today, yes, sir, weather permitting. The problem is Jesus doesn't work that way. Jesus tells us as believers, sometimes we work in the rain. Sometimes we work because of the rain. We give in the hard times. We serve in the busy times. We worship in the hectic times. Why? Because we follow a broke, homeless guy who got betrayed by his friend and murdered. There's nothing comfortable, convenient, or weather permitting about any of that. This guy's condition is that he tells Jesus, before he goes forward, first he wants to go back. Jesus knew his heart, and he knew, if you go back, you're never going to go forward. This is exactly what the Israelites did, right? God freed them from 400 years of bondage to this evil Pharaoh, and they're wandering around in the desert, and before too long, what are they saying? We want to go back. Because the change required to go forward was too painful, so they decided they want to go back. Anglican Bishop J.C. Ryle said, those who look back want to go back. And some of us are still telling Jesus this today. Some of you, sometimes we're still telling Jesus, look, Jesus, I want to follow you, but first let me party out the rest of this year. I want to follow you, but first let me sleep with a few more people. I want to follow you, but first let me blow my time and money and resources on a few more things, and then I'll get around to it. And basically, I want to follow you, but first let me be my own God for a little bit longer. Jesus says, you will ruin your life that way. And some of you know that. That's not a long-term plan. It's not a long-term plan. What Jesus calls us to do is exactly what he's doing here. Plow a straight road. A straight line. Literally, that's what he's doing. From Galilee, through Samaria, even though it was difficult, all the way to Jerusalem, straight up to the cross. He's plowing a straight line. He's got his feet in one direction. He's got his face in the same direction. He's got his heart, his devotion, everything pointed in the same direction. He's not looking back. He's not saying, back in the day, remember back in Galilee when people liked me? Remember up there when I was feeding thousands of people and I was converting water into wine and everybody was like, ooh, Jesus is the life of the party. We love some Jesus. He's not saying that. Those times are over because he's about to get crucified. But he's still walking a straight line. And that's exactly what he expects us to do today. To walk a straight line, to keep our hands to the plow, devote ourselves to him, follow him until we see him, and spend all of our time down here loving Jesus and loving other people. To put him before everything else. Listen, your love for Jesus and your love for Jesus' people has to come before your American pride, your black pride, your gay pride, your white pride, your Mexican pride, your feminist pride, your Baptist pride, your Methodist pride. Your love for Jesus and Jesus' people has to come first. Anything else is sinful, discriminatory tribalism. I'll wrap it up with this. We don't know what the men in this story did, either of them. Luke leaves their stories open-ended, almost as if to remind us that their stories in many ways are our stories. And he wants us to decide, every time we have to choose, is it going to be comfort or Jesus? How are we going to resolve that? Every time we have to choose, right, we want to say, Jesus, I will follow you, but how are we going to resolve that? Every time our tribe competes with our devotion for loving Jesus and loving people, how are we going to resolve that? Some of you, for the first time, need to decide, I'm going to follow Jesus. I have not accepted him. That's the tribe I want to be a part of. I want to have my heart devoted toward Jesus and loving all people for the rest of my life. That's what I want. And you need to make that decision for the first time. Some of you, maybe you've already made that decision, but if you're honest, since you've made that decision, or maybe since you hit some dark season of life, your life has been anything but a straight line. It's really been characterized as bouncing back and forth from one option to another. And for you, you need to decide, I need to get rid of my options. Because that's what commitment is, right? It's getting rid of your options and devoting yourself to Jesus. And we need to do that because following Jesus is not the easiest life, but it is the best life. And when it comes to Jesus and the way he presents it, it's the only life. It's the only option we have. Amen.